The planet Rhinora had once been green and full of life. Great rivers had crossed its surface and silver cities had touched the clouds. Now everything was gone. The cities were black ruins and the rivers ran with ash. The air was filled with smoke and the sky carried a red glow that never faded. For 10 long years, war had eaten everything the people had built. The Dravens, tall, gray-skinned invaders from beyond the stars, had come to claim the world for themselves. They had no pity, no mercy, and no understanding of human life. In the middle of this broken world stood a woman named Mira. She had been a soldier before the war, trained to defend her homeland, but she had never imagined it would come to this. Every friend she had ever known was gone. Every city she had ever walked through was destroyed. She had lost her family in the early battles, yet she still fought. Mira was not fighting for medals or glory. She fought because she could not accept defeat. She carried an old blade made from human steel, cracked and scratched from hundreds of battles. Her armor was made of mismatched pieces, patched again and again by her own hands. The visor on her helmet was broken long ago, so she went without it. Her dark hair was tied behind her head, and her face carried dust and scars. But her eyes, though tired, burned with quiet fire. Every morning before sunrise, she walked along the wall of the last human outpost. It was not a real wall, only a ring of metal sheets, broken drones, and scorched stone. Yet it was all they had. Behind it lived the last few thousand humans of Rhinora. Most of them were old or wounded, unable to fight. They looked to Mira as their guardian. To them, she was not just a warrior. She was the spirit of survival itself. As the cold wind of dawn blew across the field, Mira stopped to watch the horizon. The land stretched out in endless gray plains, where the remains of machines and ships lay like bones. In the distance, something moved. Draven patrols. They were coming closer again. "Commander Mira," said a young soldier who ran up behind her. His name was Laro, barely 20. He had joined the defense only a few months ago. The scouts saw movement near the east ridge. "It looks like a small force, maybe 2 carriers and ground troops." Mira nodded. "They are testing us again. Tell the others to prepare the defense line. No one moves alone." Laro saluted and ran off. Mira turned to the broken cannon towers that lined the wall. Only 3 of them still worked, and even those had limited energy. She checked the power cells herself. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. She had become used to it. When the alarm sounded an hour later, everyone was ready. The sound echoed through the empty hills, a low wail that made even the strongest hearts tighten. The Dravens were coming. Mira stood at the front gate, her sword in one hand and her rifle slung across her back. Her team waited beside her. Laro, old Caven the mechanic, and 2 others, Risa and Bren. They were all that remained of her unit. The ground began to shake. In the distance, Mira saw the Draven walkers, giant machines that moved like beasts, each step leaving a deep mark in the soil. Their armor glowed faintly with red symbols. Behind them came lines of soldiers, gray and cold, their movements sharp and exact. The sky darkened as small attack drones flew ahead, scanning the walls. Mira raised her hand. "Wait for my signal," she said calmly. Her voice was steady, and her soldiers drew strength from it. When the enemy came within range, Mira shouted, "Fire!" The cannons roared. Blue energy bolts tore through the sky, striking the lead walker. It stumbled but did not fall. The second shot hit its leg and it collapsed in a cloud of smoke. The humans cheered, but Mira did not stop. She ordered the gunners to shift fire to the next target. Draven drones rained plasma shots from above, burning holes in the walls. The air filled with light and dust. Mira climbed the barricade, shooting one drone after another with perfect aim. Each shot hit its mark. When her rifle ran dry, she switched to her blade, waiting for the ground troops to reach her. The battle turned fierce. The Dravens moved in silence, their metal weapons slicing through the air. Mira met the first one at the gate. With a single swing of her blade, she cut through its weapon arm. Sparks flew as it fell. Another one lunged at her, and she ducked, driving her sword into its chest. Her muscles burned, but she did not slow down. Beside her, Laro covered the left flank, shouting orders to the others. Cavan used an old repair bot to drag wounded soldiers to safety. The defense line held, though every second felt like an hour. Then a blast hit the western wall, tearing it apart. The force threw Mira to the ground. Her ears rang. When she stood again, she saw that the Dravens were inside the outpost. Panic spread among the civilians. Mira ran toward them, shouting for everyone to fall back to the inner zone. She met Laro again, his arm bleeding but still holding his weapon. "We can't hold them much longer," he said. Mira looked around. "We will. As long as one of us stands, this place lives." She ran forward again, leaping onto the remains of a fallen machine and firing down at the invaders. Every shot she took saved another life. Every swing of her blade bought another second. She was tired, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Hours passed. The smoke grew thick and the air turned hot. The humans fought until their weapons overheated, then fought with knives, then with their bare hands. Mira never left the front. Even when her armor cracked and her blood stained the ground, she stood firm. Her voice kept the others fighting. At last, the Dravens pulled back. Their leader gave a signal and the remaining troops withdrew into the smoke. The humans were left standing in silence. Only the sound of the burning wall remained. Mira lowered her sword slowly. Her breath came in sharp gasps. She looked around at her people, wounded, dirty, but alive. They had survived another day. Laro came to her side. "They will return," he said quietly. "I know," she answered. "But so will we." That night, as the survivors gathered near the campfires, Mira walked alone to the top of the hill outside the outpost. From there she could see the horizon, glowing faintly under the red clouds. She remembered the faces of those who had fallen, the laughter of her family long ago, the songs that once filled this land. Everything was gone, but something still lived inside her. The will to fight, the fire of humanity that refused to die. She sat for a while, sharpening her sword under the weak starlight. The stars themselves seemed dim, but they still burned. She thought about what tomorrow would bring. More battles, more pain, perhaps death, yet she was not afraid. Mira knew she was the last shield between her people and the end. She accepted it with quiet strength. Her heart was heavy, but her spirit was light. She whispered softly to herself, "I will stand until the last. They will not take this world." And with that, she rose again and walked back toward the camp, ready to face whatever dawn would bring. Far away in the dark sky, unseen by her eyes, a small ship was entering Renora's orbit. Its engines glowed faintly as it descended through the clouds. Inside sat a lone traveler named Rian, scanning for human signals. He did not yet know the name of the warrior who still fought below. But their paths were about to cross, and with that meeting, the story of Rhaenora would begin to change forever. The next morning came with a gray sky and silent wind. Ash drifted across the empty plains like snow. The smell of burnt metal and smoke still hung in the air. Mira stood on the same hill where she had watched the battle the day before. Her armor was scratched and her hands were sore from fighting. The outpost below her was quiet. People were cleaning the ruins, repairing what they could, and burying those who had fallen. Every time Mira saw another body wrapped for burial, she felt a weight in her chest. But she did not allow herself to cry. She believed tears were a luxury for a safer world, and Rhaenora was far from safe. She helped lift a piece of debris from a collapsed building, freeing a trapped child underneath. The girl was frightened but unhurt. Mira smiled softly and handed her to one of the medics. The people thanked her, but Mira only nodded. She did not fight for thanks. She fought because someone had to stand between her people and the dark. By afternoon, the scouts returned from the eastern ridge. Laro came running toward her. His face was pale. "Commander," he said, breathing hard. There was movement near the crater fields. Something came down from the sky. It was not a Draven ship. Mira's eyes narrowed. "Did you see who or what it was?" Laro shook his head. "Too far. But the ship's shape looked human. Old model, maybe from the first colonies." Mira thought for a moment. No human ship had landed on Rhaenora for years. The last ones had fallen silent when the Dravens spread across the system. Could this be a lost traveler or a trick by the enemy she could not risk guessing? "Prepare a small team," she said. "We go to investigate before nightfall." She gathered Laro, Risa, and Caven, and together they left the outpost in an armored rover. The engine made a low hum as it crossed the ruined landscape. The sky above was red and heavy with clouds. As they neared the crater fields, Mira saw smoke rising in the distance. Through her binoculars, she spotted the wreck. It was a small shuttle, silver-gray with human markings. The hull was damaged but not destroyed. The symbol on its side was faded but clear. It belonged to the old Terran exploration fleet, the ones that had vanished years ago. "Stay alert," Mira said. "We do not know if it is a trap." They stopped the rover behind a ridge and moved on foot. The ground was rough and scattered with old war debris. Mira led the way, her sword strapped to her back, her rifle ready. When they reached the shuttle, they found the hatch open and smoke rising from the engine. Then a voice came from inside. "Wait, do not shoot, I am human." A figure stepped out slowly, hands raised. He was tall, wearing a flight suit marked with burn lines. His face was covered in dust, his hair cut short, and his eyes alert but calm. He looked tired, but his stance showed training and discipline. Mira kept her weapon raised. "Identify yourself," she said. "My name is Ryan," he replied. "Pilot and technician from the Terran research vessel Ardent. My ship was destroyed while escaping Draven patrols. I saw your outpost signal and came here," Caven muttered. "Impossible. The Ardent was lost 5 years ago." Ryan nodded. "We survived longer than anyone thought, hiding in the outer belt. The Dravens hunted us until only my shuttle remained. I came here searching for survivors." Mira lowered her rifle slightly. "You found them," she said. "But you chose a dying world." Ryan gave a faint smile. "A dying world is still worth saving." There was something steady in his voice, something that reminded Mira of the soldiers she had once known long ago. She studied his face for a moment and then said, "You will come with us. If you are who you say you are, we can use your help." Ryan followed them back to the rover. On the way, he looked out at the land. "How long have you been fighting?" he asked quietly. 10 years, Mira answered. "The Dravens never stop. We lose ground every month. This outpost is all that remains of the central defense line." Ryan nodded slowly. "Then you have held longer than anyone. The other colonies fell within months. You must have done something right." Mira did not reply. She focused on the road, but inside she wondered if his words were meant as praise or pity. When they returned to the outpost, the people stared in disbelief. A stranger was a rare sight on Rhinora. Mira brought Ryan to the command tent and introduced him to the remaining officers. He spoke calmly, explaining how he had escaped the Dravens and how his ship had tracked the faint human signal coming from their area. He offered to help repair their broken defenses using his ship's remaining technology. At first, the officers were unsure if they could trust him, but Mira could sense no deceit in him. His eyes held the same exhaustion she saw in her own reflection, the look of someone who had lost too much but refused to quit. That night, Ryan worked with Caven to fix the damaged power cores. He opened a small metal case from his shuttle, revealing tools and parts that none of them had seen in years. He explained how to link the energy cells together for better output. Mira watched as the lights in the defense towers flickered back to life. For the first time in months, the outpost had full power. People gathered around, amazed at the sight of glowing lights again. Children laughed as the lamps brightened the dark streets. Lara whispered to Mira, "It feels like hope." Mira nodded. She looked at Ryan, who was still working, his face lit by the blue glow of the circuits. Hope was a dangerous thing on Rhinora. It made people dream of things that might not come. Yet she could not deny that something had changed since his arrival. Later that night, Mira found Ryan standing near the watchtower, looking out at the plains. The stars above were dim through the smoke, but he seemed to study them carefully. "You should rest," Mira said as she approached. Ryan smiled slightly. "After years of hiding in space, sleeping on a real planet feels strange. Even if the air is thick with ash, it is still real." Mira folded her arms. "You came here alone." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because I could not accept that we were finished. Humanity has always found a way to rise again. I thought if anyone was still fighting, they deserved to know they were not forgotten." Mira looked away toward the horizon. "Many have tried to save this world. All failed." "Maybe," Ryan said quietly. "But failure only ends things when no one tries again." His words struck something deep inside her. She had lived so long believing that survival was the only goal left. The idea of rebuilding or winning had felt like an illusion. But hearing someone else speak with faith in humans made her feel something she had not felt in years. The next morning, Ryan began training the soldiers on how to use his upgraded devices. He showed them how to track Draven movements through old satellites still orbiting the planet. Mira stood beside him, helping organize the teams. The people were eager to learn. They worked with focus and energy that Mira had not seen in a long time. By evening, they had repaired 2 gun towers and restored communication across the valley. For the first time, they could hear other human outposts far away, faint but alive. The news spread quickly. People shouted, cried, and hugged one another. Ryan stood beside Mira, watching the scene. You were never alone, he said softly. Mira turned to him. Until now it felt like we were. That night the Dravens attacked again. Their ships came from the north, firing plasma bolts into the walls. But this time the humans were ready. The repaired towers fired back with new precision. Ryan's energy grid absorbed part of the enemy fire, saving the western gate from collapse. Mira led the counterattack, moving with renewed strength. The fight lasted for hours. When it ended, the Dravens retreated, leaving behind burning wrecks. The humans had not only survived, they had won a clear victory. Cheers filled the air. Mira stood on the wall, covered in dust and smoke, watching the horizon. Ryan climbed up beside her, carrying his rifle. You led them well, he said. You gave them reason to fight again, she replied. For a long moment, they stood in silence, looking at the stars returning above the dark sky. The people below sang an old song of hope, one Mira had not heard in many years. For the first time since the war began, she smiled. It was small but real. Ryan turned to her. The Dravens will come again, he said. I know, Mira answered, and we will be waiting. In that quiet moment, under the faint light of distant stars, two warriors stood side by side on the edge of a broken world, not as strangers, but as allies. The long night of Renora had not ended yet, but the first light of change had begun to shine. The victory over the Dravens brought new life to the outpost. For the first time in many years, laughter returned to the streets. The fires that once burned homes now lit the workstations where people rebuilt. Children helped carry supplies. Old soldiers taught the young ones how to stand watch. Hope began to move through the camp like a warm wind after a long winter. At the center of it all stood Mira and Ryan. Every day they worked together to strengthen the defenses. Ryan repaired old machines, brought drones back to life, and taught the engineers how to build simple power grids using salvaged parts. Mira trained the fighters, showing them how to move in teams, how to stay calm under pressure, and how to fight with purpose rather than fear. They became the two pillars of the outpost. When one gave an order, the other supported it. People began to see them as leaders not just of soldiers, but of the entire community. One morning, as the sun tried to break through the heavy clouds, Mira walked across the training ground. Rows of soldiers practiced drills with wooden spears and rifles. Ryan stood at the edge, holding a datapad, watching their movements carefully. Your new formation will hold longer against the Draven charge, he said as Mira approached. If we can build enough portable shields, they will be able to move between cover safely. Mira nodded. Your designs are good, but the Dravens learn quickly. They will adapt, Ryan smiled faintly. Then we will adapt faster. They both looked over the field. The soldiers shouted in rhythm, their boots hitting the dust in perfect steps. Mira felt a quiet pride rise within her. For years she had fought beside broken people who had lost all hope. Now she was seeing something she thought was gone forever: discipline and unity. At the end of training, Ryan handed her a small metal disc. I found this in one of the broken comm systems, he said. It is an old recording module. Maybe you can use it. Mira turned it in her hand. What is on it? Ryan shrugged. I have not checked. It might be from before the invasion. That night, when the fires burned low and the camp was quiet, Mira sat alone in her tent and activated the disc. A faint voice came through, old and distorted. It was a song, a simple tune from long ago sung by a human choir. The lyrics spoke of light returning after darkness, of hands reaching for each other through the storm. Mira closed her eyes. The sound brought back memories she had buried deep, the smell of rain, the laughter of her family, the festivals in the city before the war. She felt something warm rise in her chest. It was not sadness. It was strength. The next morning, she shared the song with everyone in the outpost. Ryan connected the disc to the loudspeakers, and the music filled the air. The people stopped their work and listened. Some cried, some smiled. The melody became a symbol of hope. From that day, the soldiers began to hum it before going to battle. It reminded them why they fought, not just to survive, but to live again. As days turned into weeks, the bond between Mira and Ryan grew stronger. They respected each other deeply. Mira admired Ryan's calm focus and clever ideas. Ryan admired her courage and her ability to inspire others even in the darkest moments. They trained together often. Ryan was skilled with weapons, though not as strong as Mira. She moved like a storm in battle practice, her blade striking with precision. Ryan preferred strategy and timing, using every advantage he could find. Together they became a perfect balance, strength and strategy, fire and calm. One evening, as they repaired a broken walker near the wall, Ryan said, "You know, when I first came here, I thought you were made of steel." Mira looked up from her work, and now he smiled slightly. "Now I think you are made of fire. Steel can break, but fire never stops burning." She did not answer, but her eyes softened. Compliments were rare in her world. Words like that carried weight. The repairs continued for hours. When they finished, the stars had come out. They sat on the edge of the wall, sharing the last ration bar between them. "Do you ever think of leaving this planet?" Ryan asked. Mira shook her head. "This is my home. Even if it is broken, it is still ours. If we leave, it dies. If we stay, maybe it lives again." Ryan nodded slowly. "Then I will stay too." From that day forward, their teamwork became the heart of every mission. Together, they planned raids on Draven supply lines. They moved through the ruins at night, striking fast and vanishing before the enemy could react. Each mission brought back food, weapons, and prisoners who were freed from the Dravens. The people began to whisper a name for them, the twin flames of Raynora. The legend spread across the wasteland, carried by radio signals and traders who passed between the scattered camps. But not everything was victory. The Dravens grew angrier with each human success. They started to send larger patrols, hunting the humans with advanced scanners. One night, while Mira and Ryan were out on a rescue mission, they were ambushed. It happened near the ruins of an old communication tower. Mira led a small squad through the broken streets when a flash of blue light filled the air. Plasma fire rained from above. The Dravens had set a trap. "Take cover," Mira shouted. She and Ryan dove behind a fallen wall. Soldiers scattered in all directions. Ryan checked his scanner. "They have 3 walkers and at least 20 ground troops. We cannot fight them head-on." Mira looked around quickly. "Then we do not fight head-on." She ordered her soldiers to spread out and hit the enemy from multiple sides. Ryan crawled to a higher position and used his pulse rifle to take down drones. Mira charged forward through the smoke, striking one Draven soldier after another. The battle was fierce and close. Mira moved like a shadow, cutting through the enemy lines. Ryan used the damaged power cables from the tower to create an energy surge. The explosion knocked out one of the walkers. The humans regrouped and pushed the Dravens back step by step. When the last enemy fell, the air went still. Mira stood breathing hard, her armor scorched. Ryan walked up beside her, wiping dust from his face. "You are getting better at thinking like a soldier," Mira said. He smiled. "I had a good teacher." They both laughed quietly. It was rare, but it felt natural. After the mission, the humans rescued 10 more prisoners from the Dravens. Among them were engineers and medics who joined the outpost. The population began to grow again. The walls were repaired with new materials and greenhouses were built to grow food. Slowly, Raynora started to look less like a graveyard and more like a home. Mira and Ryan continued to lead together. Every decision they made was shared. Every danger they faced together. People around them began to believe that humanity could truly win. One afternoon, as they walked through the repaired market area, a little boy ran up to them. He held a small metal star he had made from scrap. "This is for you," the boy said, handing it to Mira. "You keep the sky safe." Mira knelt and took the star gently. "Thank you. I will keep it close." The boy smiled and ran back to his family. Mira looked at the small star shining in her hand. For a moment, she felt the weight of everything they had fought for. Ryan noticed the look on her face. "You have given these people something the Dravens never understood," he said. "You gave them hope that does not depend on victory." Mira looked at him. "And you reminded me what hope feels like." That night, the two of them stood again on the wall, watching the horizon. The plains were quiet, but everyone knew the Dravens were not gone. They were regrouping, preparing for something larger. Ryan adjusted his gear. "They will strike again soon," Mira nodded. "Then we will be ready. This time they will not face one warrior. They will face all of us." The wind blew across the wall, carrying the faint sound of the people singing the old song from the recording. It rose like a promise into the night. Ryan looked at Mira. "You know, when this war is over, you could lead all the colonies." Mira shook her head. "I am not a ruler. I am a fighter. The people will need builders, teachers, and healers. My work will end when peace begins," Ryan smiled. "Then I hope peace never comes too soon. The world still needs warriors like you." She glanced at him with quiet amusement. And thinkers like you. For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the stars. The light of distant galaxies reflected in their eyes. It was a simple moment, but it carried the strength of everything they had endured. The bond between them had become unbreakable. They were not just allies anymore. They were symbols of human endurance, proof that no matter how long the night lasted, there would always be those who stood together to face it, and far beyond the horizon. In the blackness of space, the Draven fleet began to gather. Their leaders were preparing the largest assault yet. But on Rhaenyra, the humans were ready. They were not afraid because now they were united, and the fire that burned within them was brighter than any darkness that could come. The calm days did not last long. The Dravens had suffered defeat after defeat at the hands of the human defenders, and their leaders could no longer ignore it. In the deep shadows of space, they gathered their full strength. A massive fleet formed above the dying planet Rhaenyra, blotting out the stars. Their ships were like floating fortresses, glowing with cold red light. They were coming to end humanity once and for all. On the surface, the humans prepared. Mira stood on the wall of the outpost, her armor repaired and her blade sharp. Around her, soldiers moved with purpose. There was no panic this time. Everyone knew what was coming. They had all made peace with it. They would fight until the end, and they would fight together. Ryan worked day and night in the command center. He monitored signals, studied flight paths, and coordinated with the other outposts. There were 7 human strongholds left on Rhaenyra. Each one was now connected through the communication grid Ryan had repaired. For the first time in years, humanity could fight as one army instead of scattered survivors. Mira entered the command tent as Ryan stared at the tactical map. "How bad is it?" she asked. He pointed to the glowing symbols above the planet. "Worse than we expected. Their main fleet has arrived. We estimate at least 20 carriers and hundreds of assault ships. If they land all their forces, we will not have enough firepower to stop them." Mira studied the map carefully. "Then we do not let them land." Ryan looked up. "What do you mean?" "We hit them before they reach the ground," she said. "If we can destroy their landing engines, they will lose control of the descent." Ryan frowned. "That would mean taking the fight to orbit. We do not have ships that can fly that high." Mira smiled slightly. "But we have missiles and a sky full of old satellites. If we reprogram them, we can turn the sky itself into a weapon." Ryan stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It is dangerous, but it might work. I will need time to align the targeting systems." "Take what you need," Mira said. "We will hold the ground until you are ready." The next few days were filled with hard work. Every engineer, mechanic, and soldier joined hands. They rebuilt the missile launchers and wired the satellite uplinks. Children carried cables while elders helped patch the generators. Everyone had a task. The song from the old recording played softly across the camp as they worked. Its gentle notes reminded them of why they fought. At night, Mira walked through the sleeping camp. Fires burned low, casting warm light over tired faces. She saw Ryan still awake in the control room, typing commands into the system. His eyes were red with exhaustion, but his hands never stopped moving. "You should rest," she said quietly as she stepped inside. Ryan shook his head. "Not until this is finished." Mira watched him for a moment. "You carry too much weight on your shoulders." He smiled faintly. "So do you." She leaned against the table beside him. "When this is over, what will you do?" Ryan looked out the small window toward the stars. "If we survive, I will help rebuild. Maybe we can make a place where no one has to fight again." Mira nodded. "That is a good dream." Ryan turned to her. "And you?" She hesitated. "I have not thought that far ahead. I never expected to see beyond this war." "You will," he said with quiet certainty, "because you are the reason others believe they will too." Their eyes met for a brief moment. There were no words after that. They both understood that the battle ahead could be their last, but neither showed fear. By dawn, the sky darkened as the Draven fleet entered the atmosphere. Massive ships cut through the clouds like shadows of giants. The ground trembled as smaller crafts descended toward the surface. The sirens wailed across the outpost. Rian's voice echoed through the speakers. "All units to positions. Launch teams, prepare for firing sequence." Mira climbed the main tower and looked out over the plains. The horizon glowed red as enemy ships drew closer. She turned to her soldiers. "This is our world. This is our home. The Dravens believe we will break, but they are wrong. Today we stand together as one people. No matter what happens, we fight until the last breath." Humanity does not fall today, the soldiers shouted in unison. The sound rose like thunder across the camp. Then the battle began. The first wave of Draven ships fired plasma bombs at the defenses. Explosions lit the sky. The walls shook, but they held. Human cannons answered with heavy fire, striking down several dropships. In the distance, missiles launched into the air, trailing long lines of smoke. Ryan's plan worked. The reprogrammed satellites came to life, firing bursts of energy into the descending fleet. Some enemy ships lost control and crashed into the plains, shaking the ground like earthquakes. Others veered off course, colliding with each other in fiery explosions. But the Dravens were relentless. Their ground troops landed beyond the hills and began marching toward the outpost. The humans fought fiercely, using trenches and barricades. Mira led the front line, cutting through enemy ranks with her blade. The air was filled with smoke, dust, and the roar of weapons. Ryan stayed in the command tower, guiding the missiles and adjusting the satellite positions. Sweat rolled down his face as alarms blared. "We are running out of power," shouted Caven from the generator room. "Divert everything to the main grid," Ryan replied. "We have to finish this." Outside, Mira fought with every ounce of strength she had left. Her armor was scorched and her arms ached, but she refused to fall. Around her, the soldiers followed her lead, shouting her name as they charged forward. Then a massive explosion rocked the outpost. One of the enemy walkers had fired directly into the wall. Mira was thrown to the ground. Dust filled her lungs as she struggled to stand. When her vision cleared, she saw chaos. The west gate was gone and Draven troops were pouring in. She picked up her sword and rallied the survivors. "Hold the line. Do not let them through." They formed a defensive circle, fighting with everything they had. Ryan's voice came through her earpiece, crackling with static. "Mira, we have one last missile ready. It will hit the enemy command ship, but the guidance system must be activated manually from the tower." Mira looked toward the tower. It was half destroyed, smoke rising from its top. She knew what Ryan was asking without words. "I am on my way," she said. She sprinted through the burning camp, dodging falling debris and enemy fire. When she reached the base of the tower, she saw Ryan already climbing the metal stairs, limping from a wound on his leg. She followed him up. "Ryan, you should not be here," she said as they reached the top. He shook his head. "Someone has to make sure it launches correctly." "I trust your aim more than mine." Mira stepped to the control panel. The screens flickered and sparks flew. The missile's target was locked on the largest Draven ship hovering above the battlefield. Ryan typed the final codes and looked at her. "When you press this, there is no turning back." Mira's hand hovered over the button. She looked out over the horizon. The sky was burning, but among the fire she saw her people still fighting, still standing. She pressed the button. A deep rumble filled the air as the missile launched upward, cutting through the clouds. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then a flash of light lit the sky. The Draven command ship exploded, sending shockwaves across the plains. The smaller ships began to fall, losing control without their leader's signal. Cheers erupted across the battlefield. The humans had done the impossible. The Dravens were retreating. Mira turned to Ryan, her voice barely a whisper. "We did it." But before he could answer, another explosion hit the tower. The impact threw them both to the ground. Ryan managed to catch Mira's arm as the structure began to collapse. They slid down the metal stairs, landing hard among the debris. Ryan groaned, trying to stand. Mira pulled him up. The tower burned behind them. The battle outside was ending, but the cost was heavy. Many soldiers lay on the ground and fires spread through the camp. As the smoke cleared, the survivors began to gather. The Draven ships were leaving the atmosphere, vanishing into the dark sky. Humanity had won, but at great cost. Mira looked around at the wounded and the fallen. Her heart was heavy, but she knew they had saved their world. She turned to Ryan. His face was pale, but he smiled faintly. "You see," he said, "you were never alone." Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. "And neither were you." The two stood together as the rising sun began to break through the clouds. Its light fell across the ruins, turning the ash to gold. For the first time in many years, the sky of Rhinora was clear. The people gathered behind them, silent but proud. They had endured. They had fought until the end and found victory not through strength alone, but through unity. As the morning light spread across the plains, Mira raised her sword high. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing across the land. Humanity had survived its darkest night. The war was not over yet, but hope had taken root in the soil of Rhinora once again. The sun rose over Rhinora for the first time in years without smoke hiding its light. The air was calm, and the distant mountains glowed with morning colors. The battle had ended, and silence covered the land where war had once screamed. The Dravens were gone. Their ships had retreated beyond the sky, leaving behind the ruins of their defeat. The people of Rhinora stood together, tired but unbroken. Mira walked slowly through the camp. Every step felt heavy, not from pain, but from the weight of everything that had happened. Her armor was scratched and burned, her hair covered with dust, but her eyes still held the same fire that had carried her through every battle. Around her, people were rebuilding tents, treating the wounded, and searching for lost friends. There were tears, but there were also quiet smiles. For the first time in a long time, there was peace. Rian sat near the remains of the command tower, his arm in a sling. He was helping a group of engineers restore the communication system. When he saw Mira, he stood up slowly and smiled. "You should rest," he said. Mira looked at the broken tower behind him. "I will rest when everyone else does." Ryan gave a small laugh. "Then I suppose you will never rest." Mira smiled faintly. "Maybe not yet." They walked together through the ruins of the outpost. The once dark walls were now covered with sunlight, and the ground that had been blackened by fire was already beginning to show small signs of life. Grass pushed through. The cracks in the wind carried the sound of people talking instead of shouting. Every corner of the camp held stories of bravery and loss, but also of hope. A young girl ran up to Mira holding a small flag made from torn cloth. "Captain Mira," she said proudly, "I made this for the new city we will build." Mira took the flag gently. "It is beautiful. What will you name the city?" The girl thought for a moment. "New Dawn." Mira nodded. "That is a good name. May it always remind us that even after the darkest night, the sun still rises." The girl smiled and ran off to show others her creation. Mira watched her go, and for a moment her heart felt light. As the days passed, the survivors of Rhinora began to gather from across the planet. Outposts sent signals through the repaired network. Some people had lived hidden in mountain shelters, while others had survived deep underground. Now they all came together at the central plains where Mira and Ryan's army had stood their ground. Camps spread across the fields, filled with workers, engineers, farmers, and children. For the first time in generations, the human race began to rebuild. Ryan worked with the engineers to bring old technology back to life. He repaired water systems and helped reconnect solar grids. Many of the machines were damaged beyond repair, but his clever hands found ways to make them useful again. Mira organized teams to clear the ruins and gather supplies from the old cities. She trained new guards to protect the people not for war, but for peacekeeping. Every night she stood at the edge of the camp watching the stars, wondering if the Dravens were still out there, waiting for a chance to return. One evening, Ryan joined her. "You are thinking about them again, aren't you?" he asked. Mira nodded. "They will not forget what happened here." "Neither will we," Ryan said. "But next time, we will be ready." She looked at him and smiled. "Do you think there will be a next time?" "I hope not," he said. "But hope alone is not a plan. We will prepare while we rebuild." Mira admired his calm strength. "You always think ahead," she said. "That is what keeps us alive." Ryan looked at the stars. "It is what keeps us human." The wind blew softly across the plains. The smell of fresh earth mixed with the scent of firewood. In the distance, laughter echoed. For the first time, Rhinora sounded like home again. Weeks turned into months. New dawn grew quickly. Buildings rose from the rubble, built from both old human designs and Draven materials left behind. People worked together regardless of their past. Soldiers helped farmers, and engineers taught children how to use the new machines. Every person had a place. Every hand had purpose. Mira became a symbol of strength. People respected her, but she never saw herself as a hero. She often said, "We won because we stood together, not because of me." She spent her days helping wherever she was needed, lifting beams, training guards, or caring for the wounded. At night, she met with Ryan and the council to discuss plans for the future. One night during a council meeting, a messenger entered the hall. He looked nervous. "We found something," he said, holding a small metal device. It came from one of the fallen Draven ships. Ryan took it carefully and examined it under the light. "It looks like a data core," he said. "If we can access it, we might learn where they went or what they plan next." Mira frowned. "Can it be dangerous?" "Not directly," Ryan said, "but it could tell us more about our enemies. We can use that knowledge to protect ourselves." The council agreed, and Ryan began working on decoding the data. For several days he studied the core, unlocking layers of alien code, until he finally found a message. It was a transmission log between Draven commanders. The message spoke of their retreat and their surprise at human resistance. One line caught Ryan's attention. It said, "Human unity is more dangerous than their weapons." He showed it to Mira. She read the words carefully and felt something powerful stir in her heart. "They feared us not for our strength but for our spirit," Ryan nodded. "That is what makes us different." Mira placed the device on the table. "Then we will keep that spirit alive." From that day on, the people of New Dawn began teaching the next generation not only how to survive but how to stay united. Schools were built. Books were written about the Great War, about the courage of those who never gave up, and about the importance of standing together no matter how dark the times become. The young grew up hearing stories of Mira, Ryan, and the defenders of Rhinora. They learned that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the strength to act despite it. As the seasons changed, life on Rhinora began to flourish again. Rivers that had run dry now flowed once more. Fields turned green, and birds returned to the skies. The people celebrated every new harvest, every birth, and every peaceful night. They built monuments not to soldiers but to unity. On the highest hill of New Dawn, they raised a tall stone tower with the names of all who had fallen carved into its walls. At the top stood two statues, one of Mira holding her sword high and beside her Ryan holding a broken piece of technology in his hand. Together, they faced the rising sun. Years passed, and peace continued. The stars above Rhinora shone brighter than ever. The communication network reached farther than before, connecting distant settlements. Trade routes formed, and small ships began exploring nearby systems. Humanity was no longer a broken race hiding from the universe. They were explorers again, dreamers again. Mira grew older, but her spirit never faded. She still trained young recruits and often walked through the fields of New Dawn, talking to children who played under the open sky. They called her Mother of the Dawn. She would laugh and tell them that she was just a soldier who refused to quit. Ryan became a leader of the new exploration fleet. He often returned from long missions with news of other human colonies across the stars. Some had survived in silence for decades, and now, through the network of New Dawn, they rejoined their people. Humanity was rebuilding its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors but as survivors and builders. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ryan returned from another mission. He found Mira sitting near the base of the monument, watching the sunset. She looked peaceful. "You came back," she said softly. "Always," he replied, sitting beside her. "The stars are quiet tonight." "They have seen enough war," she said. "Maybe it is time they watched us grow instead." Ryan nodded. "We have done what many thought impossible." Mira smiled. "We only did what we had to. That is what humans do." They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the horizon glow with golden light. The wind carried the laughter of children and the hum of new machines. The world that had once been filled with fire was now alive again. As the stars appeared, Mira spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about that day on the wall, when you told me I was not alone?" Ryan looked at her. "I meant every word." She smiled. "And you were right. None of us were ever truly alone. We just had to remember it." Ryan nodded. and we will keep remembering. Night fell slowly over Rhinora. The stars shimmered above the peaceful land. The tower on the hill stood tall, glowing softly under the moonlight. It was not a symbol of victory, but of unity and endurance. From that night forward, the story of the warrior woman and the man who stood beside her became a legend told across generations. It was not just a story of war, but of hope, courage, and the power of standing together. It reminded every child who heard it that no matter how hard the times became, as long as one person stood beside another, humanity would never be alone again. And so, under the endless stars, Rhinora lived on, strong, united, and free.